Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining me on this Monday to you guys. We hope you enjoy the show. We'll have James Fletcher of On3 joining us once again to get into the latest bracketology around March Madness and college basketball, with the NCAA tournament just now weeks away from getting the field announced as conference tournaments are getting underway. We're seeing some teams punch their tickets already to the big dance. And of course, we will see how the ACC plays out with some chaos over the weekend that occurred. We're proud to be covering all of that for you here on All Access AM. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. We're live here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time, 9 to 10 Eastern Time. Please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel, All Access AM. It's free to do. It helps us grow the show, and we appreciate all of you who have hit the subscribe button and supported us throughout this show, now going on 6 months. So we're excited about that and the direction we're going with this. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of take this on in 5 months. My math is always off, but we're into March now, and it's March Madness here at All Access AM. We're excited to bring that to you. So we'll have James Fletcher at 8:30. We've been having ACC team beat writers come through the show day by day, bit by bit. And today, for those of you who don't know, maybe you're an All Access AM only watcher, listener, viewer, casual observer. I cover SMU for On3 and Rivals.com at ontheponyexpress.com. So that's my full-time job, full-time gig. And so I'm going to break down some spring storylines for you guys around the transfer portal and where SMU stands heading into spring ball from kind of a high-level vantage point. We'll do that on the show in about 5-10 minutes or so whenever we get done kind of going through the weekend's news and notes and looking at some of the other games that don't impact bracketology, which we'll talk about with our friend James Fletcher here in just a moment. But when you look at SMU, you've got to dive in and look at what they've got coming back with Kevin Jennings. And of course, how do they get back to where they were in 2024 when they went undefeated in the regular season and ended up playing for the ACC championship against Clemson. A lot of things to go through in that respect. So we'll talk about the Mustangs and where things are trending there. So I don't have to bring on anyone for that one. I just was kind of looking at the schedule. And I was like, this is a perfect time for us to chat a little bit about SMU and where they stand going into spring ball and post-transfer portal. So we'll do that. And then we'll get to James Fletcher at 8:30 a.m. Central. Appreciate him for checking in with us as always. And look, with the chaos around college basketball, there's no better guy right now to have on than James Fletcher. And there's no better bank to be partnered with than our friends at Security National Bank. We bank here, All Access AM, with Security National Bank. They're based in Iowa and in Texas now with their locations, but they can service you wherever. That is really the main thing you need to know, whether it's your business, whether it's your personal finances, whether it's wealth management. They can handle all of that for you. So give them a call, 402-344-7300 today. Reach out to them and share what you're in need of, what you're looking for out of their services, and maybe how they can address your services best. They can do all of that for you at Security National Bank. So we really appreciate their support of the podcast. They're a huge reason why we were able to start this back in October and jumpstart this thing from the get-go. So excited to have Security National Bank continuing to partner with us here at All Access AM. When you look at what happened over the weekend in college basketball across the ACC in particular, we have some major bits of the NCAA tournament puzzle, so to speak, that are coming into focus. Some interesting losses that certainly impact the race in the ACC atop the standings, and also just kind of seeding in the NCAA tournament. I feel like so we'll get to some of that. Do want to run down a couple scores for you guys from Saturday as well, though, that don't really have NCAA tournament implications. Florida State continued to play well, getting an 80-71 win over Georgia Tech on the road. That improves the Seminoles to 15-14 overall, 8-8 in league play now, as Georgia Tech falls to 11-18 and just 2-14 in league play. But for FSU, they're continuing to kind of climb the ladder of the ACC tournament standings. They're now the 8th seed over Cal, over SMU. And we'll talk about Cal in just a moment, but very important win there for Florida State as far as seeding goes. And they're sitting there in that 8th seed. If they beat Cal in that second round game, they'll face Duke. If Cal wins that game as of now, they'll face Duke. SMU now relegated after the weekend to that 10 seed spot, which would mean a Tuesday first round game in the ACC tournament against Pitt. Team SMU took care of on the road in impressive fashion, I would say, especially in their second half. But that certainly changes SMU's march to and through the ACC tournament. They'd face Louisville as of now in the second round. So SMU's 0-2 road trip out west, which we'll talk about with James Fletcher, certainly impacting their seeding in the ACC tournament. And we'll see kind of how FSU finishes. Maybe a run they can't ascend into the NCAA tournament without winning the ACC tournament, which would be quite something. But they are one of the teams you don't want to see down the stretch here. And SMU gets their regular season finale is at Florida State. So keep an eye on that one. And then the Seminoles do face this week. They'll take on Pitt on the road. So they'll fly back and then have senior day on Saturday. So FSU could finish 10-8 in ACC play. Would be a really nice first season there for FSU basketball coach. Name always escaping me. Some folks probably just screaming at me. Luke Locks. So sorry about that. I forgot if his first name was Locks or anyway. Florida State, though, going to make me remember their name, no doubt about it, with the way they're playing here down the stretch and continuing to ascend. Do want to give a shout out to our friend Jerry Morphew. Appreciate you chiming in the chat. We've got those of you in here. We really appreciate you guys for chiming in and joining us each and every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday that we go live here. Also want to shout out Robert Webb, who's a new member of the site. So appreciate him for supporting our channels and helping us grow in that respect. So Pitt, Cal, this is a game that I think we'll talk with James Fletcher here briefly about this one, but Cal was on the bubble. They get a huge win over SMU. Well, guess what? They turn around at home and lose to Pitt, and it wasn't close, 72-56. That I can't imagine Cal would sneak into the NCAA tournament, but we'll ask James Fletcher about that here in just a little bit and get his take. Syracuse goes to Wake Forest and falls. Wake bounces back from what was an interesting last week or so with the return of Steve Forbes. Wake Forest wins 88-83. The Demon Deacons improved to 15-14, 6-10 in ACC play. Syracuse, guess what? The exact same. So quite the record match there. But Wake Forest was coming off 2 straight losses last week. They're able to right the ship there. They face Virginia this week, and they're trying to close out strong here and maybe get closer to 500 in league play. But that is the rundown from the weekend's games that don't really have too much NCAA tournament implications now. We will get to a ton of basketball talk around the matchups from this weekend in the ACC. We'll also preview Duke, NC State tonight on Monday slate. That game with Duke and NC State hosting 6 p.m. ESPN. That'll be a must watch for ACC fans, after Will Wade and his squad fell at Notre Dame in overtime. A big loss for the Wolfpack there, and that certainly put them in an interesting spot now in seeding as well, and really knocked them back in a game that you didn't really think NC State would lose, but they did. So we'll talk about that and what it means with James Fletcher here in just about 20 minutes. Let's get to SMU. SMU football coming off of what I would call, as somebody who's here in Dallas, covering them day in, day out, a disappointing 2025 campaign. And it's disappointing for a multitude of reasons. You can dive into this schedule and break it all down and say, well, they beat Miami. They took care of Louisville. They went on the road at Clemson. They did a lot of things that, for the growth of the program, as Rhett Lashley likes to talk about, it's hitting certain things that haven't been done at SMU in a long, long time. Well, they did that. They were able to get that win over Miami in a huge overtime win. That was major for the program. They get a win on the road at Clemson, an environment that SMU in the past and other teams of SMU have just faded in that type of a spotlight on the road. They really stepped to the plate in against Louisville in 2024 and won in a difficult environment, I would say, and were able to do that and handle business. But that game at Clemson was really a major step in the right direction, especially with the way Kevin Jennings was hobbled early, and they were able to get that done. Then you look at all the things that went wrong. Well, you lose to Baylor, you blow a 14-point lead in the final minutes. You lose to TCU when you have a fourth quarter lead early in the fourth quarter. You lose to Wake Forest in a game that in the final 2 minutes, I mean, it was crazy, but you should have found a way in that one. You can't get a couple yards to pick up a first down and end the game on your own. And you punt it, short punt. Wake hits a walk-off field goal. Crazy. Wake wins by the hair on their chinny chin chin. And that kept SMU out of the ACC championship. But then, oh, by the way, they still had life. They go to Cal. They don't get off the bus. They have to have a dramatic comeback to take a lead. And then the defense gives up a game, what ended up being a game-winning touchdown drive. SMU misses a long field goal at the gun to try and win it or send it to overtime. That would have sent it to overtime. So a really disappointing season that is then capped by, well, they came out firing on all cylinders against a top 25 Arizona team. They get a win over them, and they're able to, kind of hang on there where the offense and Kevin Jennings really made a bunch of mistakes in the second half. But nonetheless, they kind of got the bowl monkey off the back. They got the top 10 opponent monkey off the back. They went at Clemson and won. So they accomplished a bunch of things in the 25 season. But man, there's that feeling around this program that you have unfinished business. You left food on your plate. And you didn't even leave food on the plate. You left the beautiful Wagyu ribeye on the steak on the plate, and you weren't able to finish it. Like you got pulled away from the table, and that's still sitting there. You kind of ate your greens. You did some things to kind of maybe juice you up a little bit, but you didn't get to have that steak. And you certainly didn't get dessert by playing in the ACC championship. That was taken from you too. So there is a feeling of unfinished business around this building, and the way they attacked the portal, I thought was interesting, and it's for a lot of teams around college football. And we saw this a lot. We saw the celebration of group of 5 players, a few FCS players across college football that were highly successful players at that level jump up. But really, a lot of teams were more open to going after high-level group of 5 players and pillaging that entire level of play across college football. And SMU was a part of that. Many teams across the country were a part of that from the Power 4 level. And then they also took their fair share of what I would say from major additions from the Power 4 level to kind of flyers additions from the Power 4 level. And the way SMU's 2026 season will play out, we'll look back and look at these transfers that SMU added from the portal, and we'll say, okay, what went right? What went wrong? I do think that there's a pretty easy way to, if you're going to try to set your grading scale here, and then you're going to try to look at SMU and say, all right, SMU is going to do well because, or SMU is not going to do well because. We can really look at this. And for the most part, you could sit here and say they grabbed high-level transfers on offense in particular, on defensive line and some of those spots and in the back end of the secondary. And you say, okay, those are the ones that have to play at the top of their game. That's what they're brought in to do. SMU brought in, for those of you who haven't kept an eye on this is why we're here. We're breaking down SMU today as far as our early spring kind of preview-ish round table or round the ACC look that we're doing. But SMU brought in Kendrick Raphael, the Cal running back. He was over 1,000 yards all purpose, instant impact starter. Yannick Smith is expected to have a major role. They bring him in from East Carolina. They bring in Jalen Hale, a former 4-star from Alabama. They bring in 2 major transfers at tight end in Randy Pittman from FSU and then Theo Mellon-Orstrom from Texas A&M. They gave Kevin Jennings weapons. And that was the biggest thing that they wanted to accomplish for their offense heading into the 2026 season because they believe in their offensive line development. So box check there. And really there shouldn't be any guys at that offensive transfer class that you look at and you say, "Oh wow, that's a guy that is clearly going to not be able to help them win," or maybe that guy isn't going to be an upgrade at all. You could make the argument Yannick Smith making the jump from East Carolina to the ACC, maybe, but he's physically imposing. He's a really impressive player, just from a physical perspective and some of his big play stuff he did as a true freshman. So you should feel good. Like I look at the offense and if they aren't successful, you would sit here and say probably because they didn't try, not that they didn't try. They didn't really go all out to upgrade the offensive line. At the left tackle spot, at the left guard spot, they feel comfortable with the guys they have there and the depth and talent that they built. They didn't push the envelope there. They tried to get Daniel Cruz. He ends up at NC State. So if I'm trying to predict why it doesn't go well, that would be why in my mind. And if it is going to go well, it's because they hit all of those transfers on top of all of the players that they have returning on the offensive line and the backfield and the wide receiver room. You have Kevin Jennings, which, I mean, we don't even have to talk about him, but we should be talking about him more. An outstanding 2025 season in a sense. There were moments like we've seen over the last 2 years with him that you're going to sit there and scratch your head. There's no doubt about it. And I think this year, with 2025, there are moments that I think Rhett Lashley would like back. I think obviously Kevin Jennings would want back. Players are always going to have plays that they want back and things like that. But I think there was so much put on Kevin's plate, and he was injured this year, that it was just an incredible job by him to be top 10 in passing in the country, to take the steps forward in that regard and be able to win games, I think, on his own without his ability to really run and move around. The sky's the limit for him. We know that's the type of player he is. Does he hit that ceiling in 26 is the biggest question. I think he will. I think the schedule sets up well in a sense. You're right off the bat against FSU. Then you got Louisville. Those are ACC games. They're on the road. They're different. And if he writes his legacy and wins those games, SMU should be rolling into a game at Notre Dame with college football playoff hopes on, you're playing for seeding. Maybe you're in a position where you should be able to say, okay, they can win that, they can lose that game, but also they're going to be in the college football playoff as a one-loss team. That's I think where SMU is at if they can get those wins. But to go to the defensive side of the ball, this is where it gets interesting. And this is where I talked about really the group of five and the power four kind of look that they have. You have a defensive line that they went out and they grabbed Tavion Atkinson, who gets here in the summer from the transfer portal at strong side defensive end. They love him. You went out and got Marquise White, a UMass transfer, who's like 25 years old at defensive end at the Bandit, the edge rusher spot. You have Ira Singleton at that spot from USF, who is a well thought of pass rusher from the Bulls. You have Akil Washington coming off injury, who Scott Simons really liked, and he coached him at Liberty. They like him a lot as a pass rusher. So if those guys hit, man, you look there and say, okay, they brought in veterans with a lot of snaps who have talent, and they played fundamentally sound, defensive football at the Bandit spot. Tavion Atkinson hits as a star type of player and level to pair with Ja'Kai Lang at the strong side defensive end spot. Then you look at why it might not pan out. Okay, well, Tavion Atkinson's a JUCO guy. He'll have to step up in competition right off the bat. He gets here in the summer. You look at the other side. Okay, Marquise White was good, but played at a lower level. Ira Singleton was good, but played at a lower level. Didn't make the jump. Akil Washington, can he stay healthy? Those are the reasons why it might not work out. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't get off to a good start this year at the defensive tackle position. You have a Big 12 starter in Malcolm Alcorn Crowder. You have Jonathan Jefferson, who's had a ton of time to recover from his knee injury, suffered a whole spring ago. A really talented player who they love in there. They've got depth behind them at the defensive tackle spots. You have all your linebackers back that really made a major impact. And then in the back end, you have Jimmy Wyrick, who's kind of that veteran, savvy safety that they added. You have Tyron Polley, the sky's the limit for him. Then you have Marcellus Barnes at corner, who they really, really like. And then they went out and added Jarvis Lee at nickel, who they beat out Auburn, Florida State, Oregon for him. Like, so many teams were after him, and they think he's a difference maker. That's the reasons why that defense can hit and get back to the way it panned out in 2024. If it doesn't, you're again looking at you added Javon Thomas from Texas A&M. Well, there's a reason why maybe he didn't end up playing much at Texas A&M. Jimmy Wyrick, UTSA transfer. Can he step up to the level of competition? Jarvis Lee, same story. Is some of the corner pieces that they have more than serviceable this year because that secondary was leaky? And then on the flip side, you could say, well, if it works, they hit on the athletic evals, they hit on the mindset evals of this defense. That's what I keep hearing out of the building, is that there's a mindset that they were not fully missing, but there was bits and pieces of this year. We saw moments where SMU played really well, played sound, played hard, and then we had moments where they were almost not playing as one defensive unit. They were playing as 11 defensive players. And I think there's a difference. And so that's kind of the next step for SMU, is getting back to some of that that they weren't able to do as much last year. So before I answer Jerry Morphew's great comment about SMU, I do want to remind you guys about our friends at Sportsmo. Make sure you guys are locked in with our friends at Sportsmo. It is the app that helps you make micro donations and pledges based on how your team performs. You can pick your team, and all of the money goes directly to your favorite college basketball, college football team. Their fund benefiting their student athletes. So make sure you guys check out Sportsmo. It is tax deductible as well. And you can now bet your friends. You can play head to head. So a lot of fun things happening with our friends at Sportsmo. So make sure you guys check them out. Get the app downloaded for March Madness and be ready to rock for this final week of the regular season.
College basketball hits different with Sportsmo. You tap, they score. You pledge, they drop a three. You give as a group, they win as a team. At this point, you're not watching a game, you're in it. Download the app, fund your wallet, and get in the game. Download Sportsmo. Power the play.
That's right. Power the play. And do want to get to Jerry Morphew's comment here in the chat. He said, SMU got off to a slow start last year. This year, they have to hit the ground running. What do they have to do to be ready for early games with meaning? Here's the thing. I don't think SMU got off to a slow start in a sense. They got off to a slow start on the score or on the win-loss column. And I think there's a little bit of a difference against Baylor. You had an SMU team that raced out to a 10-0 lead. You had SMU with a 14-point lead with 6 minutes to go. And that's a team that's ready to play. I mean, SMU jumped all over Baylor and made some key stops early and things like that. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference where SMU as a team, and especially after you lost Jordan Hudson, their ended up star wide receiver who had ended up going to the combine here, and Alex Kilgore, their stud linebacker. Zakai Barker got hurt, who was expected to play at that time. They had a lot of adjusting that they were doing because of that. I think offensively, I mean, that was a major piece. RJ Maryland wasn't back to his normal self very clearly, and wasn't for most of the season. And so they worked through some things. And there's a lot of, if you want to attach blame, there's a lot of different blame and reasons and things like that. Like, I think SMU got away from the run at certain parts, that interception for Kevin where they're down near the goal line and it's, second and 2 or something like that. And throw a fade ball. I mean, just run the ball, pick up the first down. TCU, we kind of stuck the irons to Rhett Lashley in a way when they threw it 3 times. But your players got to make plays too. Kevin Jennings misses a wide open receiver. If they hit that play, you're looking at, I think, you're looking at a 10-point lead. I think maybe that was that moment, or you're back in front. You're kind of having that confidence. So I think this team was just perfectly imperfect. And we saw that throughout the year. Like you go through this season for SMU and you look at the way they played against Wake on the road. That was middle of the season. That was sandwiched between Clemson and Miami, two of the biggest wins this year for SMU. And then you go to Cal and you're thinking, okay, they just fired their coach. They just lost to Stanford. They got everything to play for. You're going to see an SMU team come out and roll, or at least play like they have an ACC championship spot on the line. But Cal matched that energy and exceeded it, much more so in the first half than SMU. And then you saw SMU settle in. And so SMU's issue this year, you could argue, was not starting slow. It was the entire like team, like throughout the season. SMU was perfectly imperfect the entire year. And we saw that in moments, we saw that in lulls. So I just think that was a team. Like the story of SMU's 2025 team is that they were perfectly flawed or perfectly imperfect, and it caught up to them in key moments throughout the year. You could take the two losses to Baylor and TCU, and then you have Wake in the middle of the season, and then you have Cal at the end of the season. So, I mean, you could argue that hey, they didn't get it done in key moments throughout the year, and then at the same time, they also got it done in key moments during conference play. So I don't know. I think and with Rhett Lashley's record and kind of how this whole thing has gone, and we've talked about this a lot at ontheponyexpress.com, is people look at, okay, well, Rhett wasn't very good against Power 4 opponents. Well, yeah, he took over a program he had to rebuild. He got a new quarterback, blah, blah, blah. They were a group of 5 team the first year, but they played well against Maryland and Oklahoma. They had shots. They had shots against TCU. They eventually got there with that win in 24. They had the wrong quarterback starting against BYU. So there's all these little things that have built up. And eventually we're going to get out of the shadow of when SMU is group of 5, and we're going to be able to evaluate things as a whole as a Power 4 program. And we're there, I think, as far as how you evaluate how this team starts or what the trends are with this team. But each year, SMU's ticked off certain things that people are starting to point to as trends and make them, kind of non-stories, right? Like people were saying SMU can't win a bowl game. But if you look back at their run of bowl games under Rhett Lashley, you can see that they were ready to play against Boston College. They just didn't finish. They were missing a couple pieces. You look back at their first bowl game against BYU. Well, the offensive tackle went the wrong way on the 2-point play. If not, they win that game. There's just these things that popped up over the last few years that they've managed to fix. And then guess what? They didn't play in a bowl game in 24 because they played in the college football playoff. It's a big difference. So there's things that I think Rhett Lashley is still going to check off his list. I think they start fast and beat Florida State. They beat Louisville and kind of get into the teeth of conference play. And who knows? You've got Virginia, you've got Cal, you've got Virginia Tech. You've got some games that are going to be really difficult, and we'll see how they go. Speaking of seeing how things go, we do want to check in now with our friend James Fletcher, who's joined us on All Access AM. And here we go. We go into this, James, with quite the weekend of ACC play to break down. Let's start with Duke, Virginia, though. A major matchup. I thought Virginia would, with their size, have the ability to keep this one close and, really step to the plate and at least make this a game. But in the end, Duke just way too much here. 77-51, a dominant first half by Duke on the offensive end. And they just really showed why they're the best defensive team in college basketball right now as well.
Yeah, I thought that we really saw what makes Duke one of these upper tier teams that right along with Michigan, with Arizona, that could win it all by the time where it's all said and done here in March. But you talk about that offensive performance in the first half. How about doing that without a big Cam Boozer performance? He did not get to his shots very well. He really had relied on getting to the free throw line to get things done. And that kind of shows me more and more the growth that he's taking as a player and that this Duke team is taking, that when the shots aren't there, when you're not able to get past Johan Grunlow and that back line of the defense, sometimes it's about just getting to the free throw line, taking the points the way that they come to you. And Duke was able to do that. From there, they created this kind of baseline The defense was strong all throughout the day, and then they pulled away throughout the course of that game. And yeah, I was really fascinated to watch this one. Wasn't sure if Virginia could really get the job done given the tier that Duke is playing in right now, but to win by that margin, I think was a huge statement for Duke, because we've talked about this Virginia team in these last couple of weeks. They had been one of the most consistent forces in the ACC. So to knock them off the pedestal in the way that they did was a huge statement.
Isaiah Evans, 19 points. He leads the way for Duke. His emergence has just been terrific for them. They needed a little bit more from him offensively. They've gotten it now down the stretch of this season, and we're seeing the secondary scoring for Duke really emerge. What are your thoughts on what's been the difference for him as we've seen him turn into, one of their most reliable players?
Yeah, he's always been an absolute heater ever since he got to the college game. He's had the ability to knock down a couple of three-pointers and really get things going. But to be able to more consistently, night in and night out, put together an offensive performance, even if he's not, 3 for 3 to start from beyond the three-point line, to be able to get downhill a little bit more, just add a little bit more strength to his frame. He's got a very wiry build. And so to be able to add a little bit of strength to that, get a little bit older, a little bit more time in the weight room, I think has been big for him on that offensive end. And I don't think you can really discount the impact that the defense has on his offensive game. Having a guy like Dame Sarr, who throughout this season has continued to emerge, find his role with this Duke team, struggled really in that first half of the season, and has really come into his own, at least on the defensive end of the floor, still figuring out that offensive game as he goes through the season here. But to have a guy like that who can pick up the primary assignment on the wing, allow Isaiah Evans, those couple more seconds to breathe, to play off the man in the corner on defense. That gives him that little burst that he needs on the other end of the floor to get downhill, to get off of the next screen, and all the things that he can provide you on the offensive end of the floor.
When you look at the Duke Blue Devils, I mean, they're the number 1 overall seed. I mean, barring a surprising finish to their season, is that where you see? I mean, they probably have to drop the next 2 to even see that happen, or have an early exit in the ACC tournament.
I do think that because things are so tight between them and Michigan right now, with the same record, they do have the head-to-head against Michigan. That's what's got them clearly in this number 1 overall spot. But a loss probably with a Michigan Big Ten championship would lead to Michigan being the number 1 overall seed, because of the amount of quad 1 wins that they would take through that postseason tournament. But yeah, Duke is in pole position here. If they win out, they will be the number 1 seed. There's no way that Michigan, just by winning 1 or 2 more quad 1 wins throughout these final 2 weeks here, can catch them. It's going to take a Duke loss for them to be knocked off of this spot. And really, the interesting one is that Arizona kind of comparison as we look at those two teams. Can Arizona catch them even if Duke loses? That one is a little bit more up in the air. I do think that Duke has a little bit more cushion between themselves and the Wildcats right now, the way they're playing.
And let's flip it over to the opposite end of the spectrum. The last few schools in, the potential last 4 in, the last 4 buys. SMU went out west and they messed around a little bit. They obviously lost BJ Edwards in that Cal game and didn't have him for the second half in that game. They missed 15 free throws, but they found out, that they really did not show up against Stanford. A poor performance out west. You now have SMU in the last 4 buys. The line for error here, especially going into this week, seems thin for SMU. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves in a first 4. They're going to find themselves on the outside looking in if they lose their last 3 games, including the ACC tournament. What's SMU's margin for error here?
They do have a little bit of a margin for error because the bubble is pretty set where it is in terms of the teams that are firmly in the field, which I think is everyone Texas A&M and up. So really the 10 seed on is pretty firmly in the field right now. There's not a lot of wiggle room from the 11 seed up to the 10 seed conversation. So SMU can still feel pretty good, but like you said, an 0-3 stretch to just close out this regular season. They would also obviously have this West Coast road trip that would be on that losing streak as well. If they were to lose out, that would put them in real danger where the committee could take a look and say, we're trying to put the best teams in college basketball into this field. They're on a 5-game losing streak. At best, I think in that case, they would be in that first 4. So you've got to still pick up some more results here. But I do think as long as they're able to kind of steady the ship, they don't have to go on a miraculous ACC tournament run. They don't have to win out in the regular season. They just need to kind of pump the brakes on this little losing skid, establish themselves, show the committee that they are still that SMU that we've seen throughout the season. And I think they likely land here on the 10 seed line, almost regardless of what else happens around.
And one of the teams they'll face, Miami, this Wednesday at SMU, and then they face one of the hottest teams in the ACC against Florida State on Saturday on the road. They have 2 quad 2 opportunities here down the stretch of this season. Would that Miami win? Like, if they can get that one in Moody and find a way on do some senior night magic, is that the recipe for, okay, lock this in? Miami currently sitting as a 8 seed matched up in your West region out of San Diego versus Missouri. The Hurricanes are playing well, but SMU has an opportunity here to beat one of the teams in the field Wednesday night.
Yeah, I do think that would be the type of win that would essentially lock SMU into that 10 seed line. If they can beat a team that's on a higher seed line than them, kind of close the gap between those 2 teams, drag Miami down a couple spots, drag them up 1 or 2 spots on the overall seed line. That's the kind of thing that gives you that cushion. We talk about the teams that they're around. I think that's also important to kind of gauge here. You look at a Texas A&M who has taken some losses as well. UCF, who has been up and down in Big 12 play, probably not going to make a deep conference tournament run because of the strength of the teams in that conference. UCLA, another team with some big wins, some big losses recently as well, though. And then Santa Clara is the team on that 11 line just above the first 4. I think that Santa Clara is the reason we have kind of a stopgap there is that they're done with the regular season. They only can play 1 or 2 more games in their conference tournament, and it's going to take them beating a St. Mary's early in that conference tournament run to even improve their resume in any way at this point. So you look below you, there's not a lot of room to fall, but if you can pick up that win against Miami, yes, it would go a long ways towards kind of locking themselves into where they're at.
And Miami's finish, obviously SMU, and then they get Louisville at home Saturday. Louisville's an interesting team. You know, just one of those teams that right now has been kind of all over the place in a sense. They lose to Clemson at Little John. Clemson kind of restores a little bit of faith in Little John. What did you make of that game over the weekend with Clemson coming away with an 80-75 win? And you know, Louisville could drop out of the top 25 this Monday, but where do you see the Cardinals and where they stand?
Yeah, in that game, you saw Mikael Brown on the bike late in the game, and that raises even more questions for the Cardinals. The health of their star point guard. What is that going to look like as we enter March? Final week of the regular season into conference tournament and the NCAA tournament. It is important to have your best players available. And so we'll see how that turns out, because I do think that if he's not at 100%, they are going to struggle greatly in some of these big time matchups that they're going to have to enter over the coming weeks. And you saw it there against Clemson. That Clemson team, look, they were on a skid, but you cannot take this team lightly. They are a really solid NCAA tournament caliber team. Louisville found that out over the weekend. And so I think that the health of Mikael Brown is really what we're looking at for this group. They're a little bit of a tough team to seed as well, because the analytics still haven't really dinged them too hard, but the resume metrics just have not been good recently. They continue to kind of fall down the pecking order in those.
With Clemson, currently sit as an 8 seed. The Tigers are one of those teams that I wonder how many teams on a neutral site wouldn't mind seeing them. You know, just with the way Clemson has generally played at home over the last several years, that, you know, Brad Brownell has kind of gotten off of that like hot seat-ish discussion from a couple of years ago, and now has them kind of rolling as among the most consistent teams in the ACC. They've been a little all over the place in kind of that middle of the ACC schedule, but they're kind of finding their game here a little bit late. That Louisville win, I mean, what does it suggest about their ability to not only finish the season strong, but also make a run in the NCAA tournament, because their final couple games here, they do have North Carolina, another statement opportunity, and then they get Georgia Tech. So kind of an easy finish with their final senior day game going on there, but they get a chance to make another statement here against a top 25 team.
It will be a big opportunity for them because they slipped well down the board during that little losing streak that they had, like you said, in the middle of ACC play. Got all the way down into that 9-10 seed conversation, now back up onto the 8 seed line. If they can pick up that win, scratch and claw their way back into a 7 seed or even up into a 6 seed conversation with a deep run in the ACC tournament, that's the kind of thing that can make the difference in you making a deep run, in you having a path that is viable to make a deep NCAA tournament bid. But you look at being in that 8 seed range is just not where you want to be. You look at the 1 seeds this year, and that would put you at risk of facing a Michigan, an Arizona in that first weekend. That is not what you want to do by any means, not to mention some of the teams on the 9 seed line that are kind of finding their stride. You look at Missouri kind of making their way up the board. You don't want to face a team that's hot like that at this point in the season. So they've got some upward mobility here. They need to capitalize on it by proving that this wasn't just getting off of a losing streak. This is a return to form where they were early in the conference schedule, where they got themselves up into the 6 seed range in bracketology. So they're kind of floating in this middle ground. They've looked like a 6 seed. They've looked like a 10 seed, now finding their way into that middle and trying to see where they settle out by the time Selection Sunday comes around.
How much did Virginia, their loss at Duke, not hurt them? Obviously, they're safe. They're one of the best teams in the country, but just in the eyes maybe of seeding and how high they could go, because that loss, you really wanted to see Virginia just show that they could be there with Duke, and they kind of missed that opportunity. Not kind of, they did.
Right. They were in real conversations about the 3 seed line entering Saturday, especially if they were able to pull out a win. But even with a close loss, I think they would have been right on that fringe. They would have had the upward mobility. Now I think that they're kind of capped out at the 4 seed line, unless of course they got a rematch with Duke and were able to win it and kind of even things out there. But as things stand, where they are in their schedule, I think that they're really capped on that 4 seed line. You don't want to see them fall into that 5 seed conversation. Obviously, I think that they're in pretty good shape there. Obviously, you can't go on a losing streak when the margins are as close as they are. But with a kind of handful of SEC teams behind them, as well as St. John's on that 5 seed line, I do think that they've got a little bit of cushion before they have to worry about not being the top seeded team in their pod. But yes, they did cap themselves with that loss and definitely limited their ability to get up into that 3 seed conversation and even the 2 seed conversation if they had been able to make a deep ACC tournament run.
When you look at NC State and what this team brings to the table, it is just such a wild resume, I think. And Will Wade, made no bones about it. I mean, you go and you play Notre Dame and you lose 95-90 in overtime. NC State squarely in the NCAA tournament, 6 seed right now in the ACC tournament. They've had a really good first season as a whole under Will Wade, but it's games like these that make them one of those boom or bust teams of March Madness.
It's been a very difficult debut season to kind of create opinions about, because you see these highs and you think, wow, this is what it's going to become under Will Wade. This is what we're going to see from this NC State program. And then a big loss. And you're like, well, that was concerning. What's wrong with the program? What do we need to reevaluate? And then they kind of bounce back with another big win. It's been so up and down. I agree with you. But yes, they are firmly in the NCAA tournament field now. They're on that 9 seed line. Like I said, I think the 10 seed line even is pretty well established into the field at this point. So for them, it's going to be about seeding. And they're, unfortunately, the way that things have fallen, they look like they're going to be in that 8 seed to 9 seed range. And we're going to find out, can they get hot on the right day and give a scare to one of these 1 seed teams when it comes down to it?
I do want to say your bracketology, SMU 10 seed, as somebody who covers SMU day in, day out and is from Tampa. I mean, I'm just saying, if you get one thing right in bracketology, James, you make sure you nail that one and keep that as is. I'll talk with Andy. We'll figure that out. SMU is a team that went to Cal and lost. Cal, biggest win of their year as far as needed it, had to have it, then loses to Pitt at home. Their NCAA tournament dreams done at this point?
It's hard to say that they're completely done. Obviously, we've got automatic bids out there. We've seen it with Oregon State a couple of years ago. Georgetown got in at the buzzer in the conference tournament. But yes, it does appear that they're a little bit too far now on the outside looking in on the bubble. They're also below Virginia Tech in my bubble watch here. So you've got your own conference that you're going to have to go up against as you kind of compare resumes. I think that they're a little bit too far off from being able to make it, but not completely out of there. That's, of course, pending that we have no bid stealers from either the Mountain West or the A10, even the also we talk about Miami, Ohio, and their bubble conversation. So without bid stealers entering the mix, they're a little bit too far outside to really consider them a true bubble contender. But with the possibility of those three teams, I think that they're pretty well eliminated at this point from getting one of those at-large bids.
You mentioned Virginia Tech. They play a competitive game, 89-82 loss at NC State over the weekend, or North Carolina, excuse me. Henry Visar, huge game for him, leading UNC without Caleb Wilson. What's your take on North Carolina? Hubert Davis is just doing a masterful job there without Caleb Wilson and having to change their team around completely in a sense. But Virginia Tech has showed so much fight that, they're outside looking in a sense. But how do you view those two teams as far as seeding for North Carolina and then looking at Virginia Tech? And they still have an opportunity to face Virginia here in their final game of the regular season.
Yeah, for North Carolina, I'll start there. It has been great to see how they've kind of rebuilt and been able to figure out ways to succeed without Caleb Wilson. I think when he went down, we talked about here on the show the need to get guard help. The offense had gone through Wilson and Visar. It's obviously still going largely through Visar now that he's back on the court and looking healthy. But they needed the guards to step up, and they've gotten Seth Trimble to provide more and more big performances down the stretch of this season. He looks more and more comfortable, and it's going to be interesting to see when they do reintegrate Wilson. There is talk that he's going to come back with the cast on the hand. Obviously, that's going to limit his ability to control the offense. So I do think there's still going to be a lot of value in what Seth Trimble has been able to do recently and how he can propel that forward into whatever this team looks like when Wilson is back out there and in the mix. So, really impressive for them. I think that they continue to just slowly slide their way up. They're in that 6 seed range right now. Could definitely see them getting onto the 5 seed line. I think it'll depend some on what Caleb Wilson looks like if he does come back prior to the NCAA tournament. That will kind of determine how we view them in their current form, and then therefore how they are seeded against some of their peers around them. For Virginia Tech, though, another one of these seasons. It feels like it's become an unfortunate reality of this Mike Young era that they just find themselves right on the bubble, and more often than not, it's been just right on that wrong side of the bubble as we come down to the final weeks of the season. They're always in the mix. It's what's going to get them over the hump. It looked like early in the season, having a guy like Neo Avdalas might be that thing that got them there. It just wasn't the case as we went down the stretch. He kind of struggled, hit that freshman wall. But it's unfortunate because this is a really solid team. They're good in ACC play. We know that, but they can't ever seem to just get right over that hump and onto the right side of the bubble here in these last couple of seasons.
Duke at North Carolina State tonight, Monday night, 6 p.m. ESPN. This is, again, it wouldn't shock me. Now, let me preface this by saying I think Duke's going to win. I think Duke's going to win comfortably. But the way NC State's season has been, it wouldn't shock me if NC State conjured up some crazy magic and got a win either. That said, your early take and preview on tonight's matchup between the Blue Devils and the Wolfpack.
I think it's going to be really an interesting game. I do, again, think and agree with you that Duke probably runs away with it down the stretch. But just how good can this Duke team be? Can they continue to stretch out these leads? Can they continue to build up these metrics and these analytics in their favor? When they flip to the 1 seed overall, don't forget that Michigan still had all of the metrics in their favor. It was the head-to-head that had Duke in the number one spot. They've slowly started to flip these analytics to say maybe Duke is a little bit better than Michigan overall over the course of the season. So can they continue to flip those in their favor? Can they continue to create space from the rest of college basketball in those analytics? That's what's on the line tonight for the Blue Devils, if they're able to kind of pull away and get another dominant win.
As far as what seeding help NC State could get from this win, what can they do with a win like this? I mean, is it that dramatic if you could take down the number one team in the country?
Yeah, beating Duke is for sure something that is worth up to a full seed line at this point. Even though we're late in the season, we've got a lot of data in there. NC State is a team that wins above the bubble is one of their weaker metrics. As you look at it, strength of record is another one of them that's on the lower end when you look at where they stack up. So if they can get a big leap, which you can, beating the number one team in the country is going to give you a big jump, because that's a full game added. In terms of wins above the bubble, a bubble team is not expected to beat the number one team in the country. So that'd be a full win that you would add to that metric. That would leap you up quite a few spots and really put you in the mix to jump, like I said, a full seed line there to where you could be in the upper 8 seed range, and then be able to, from there, have some more upward mobility. Maybe you could get into that 7 seed conversation by the time the conference tournament is over.
Great stuff as always. James Fletcher, will continue to check in with you as Bracketology continues to be the talk of ACC fans as another wild week begins. Let it begin here Monday night with Duke at NC State, and we'll have you covered here on All Access AM with all the rest of the schedule this week, and of course more Bracketology talk with James Fletcher. James, thanks for the time.
Appreciate it.
There he goes, James Fletcher with us on All Access AM. Appreciate his time as always. He's a huge help to the show. He's got his finger on the pulse of everything you need to know in that respect. So make sure you give him a follow on Twitter as well, and give him all the clicks and reads as he dives into bracketology. Make sure you also click on the link below this podcast or this video description and check out our friends at Corporate Magic. Corporate Magic delivers events that are seen by millions, are consumed by so many people over the course of a year, whether it be national sales meetings that leave a lasting impact, or global broadcasts that are seen by millions across the country. Corporate Magic can handle all of them for you. So make sure you guys check out Corporate Magic, what they can bring to the table for you and your company, your event. CorporateMagic.com is where you can find all the information on what they can do for you. They are a trusted partner with decades of experience and continue to raise their game. All the events that they pass along to me, and some of them we can show you in videos, some of them we can't even show you in videos. They continue to set the bar incredibly high. So make sure you reach out to our friends, Corporate Magic, today. And of course, support all of our sponsors, Security National Bank and Sportsmo. We want to thank them for their support of All Access AM. And we appreciate you guys for tuning in to this edition of All Access AM as well. We will be back Wednesday, Thursday. We'll talk more ACC hoops, maybe have some more spring previews going on as we look back at transfer portal classes and assess where these teams across the ACC are. But I hope you guys have a really good Monday and have a great day out there, and appreciate all of you guys for commenting in the chat and joining us on this edition of All Access AM. We'll be back Wednesday, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time. Please hit the subscribe button, throw us a like, a rating, a review. We appreciate all of you guys who do that on All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Have a great Monday, everyone.